All right, good morning, everyone. A friend of mine, Wilson Adams, who preaches in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, posted recently in Facebook about the messiness of life. And I'm paraphrasing some of the things he said or rewording a couple of those things. That our lives are not as clean and clear cut as we would like them to be. That for all of us on one level or another, life is messy. Worry engulfs us. Your kids do stupid things. Marriages are rocky. Jobs are pressurized. Relationships are strained. Loved ones die. Friends betray you. Sometimes Christians betray you. You face enormous pressure as a caregiver. Bad news hits. Life isn't fair. Bottom line, each of us lives in the midst of brokenness. Some are better at hiding it, masking it, or putting it out of sight, out of mind. Or as the philosopher Blaise Pascal once argued, we create diversions in our lives essentially so that we can live in denial. But the truth of the matter is we live in a broken world, all of us, and our lives are messy. And the devil lurks. He's not far from any one of us. And he wreaks havoc. In 2 Corinthians chapter 2 and verse 11, the Apostle Paul says, so that we would not be outwitted by Satan, for we are not ignorant of his designs. The devil has an MO, a method of operation. There are definite tactics that are fairly consistent down through the ages. There's little that is off limits in terms of his destructive force. He observes no international rights declaration. There's no Geneva Convention. And the bottom line is he doesn't fight fair. He cheats. He breaks the rules. He doesn't care. The only objective is to bring you down with him. Some years ago, I was living and preaching in Alabama on one hot summer day on a Saturday morning. In back of our house, there was this huge hill. And our property had gone up to the bottom of the hill, and these weeds were just getting out of control. And so I was clearing the bottom of the hill, doing a lot of weed whacking and so on, sweating like a pig in that Alabama humidity. And I was thinking about the curse of sin, about the thorns and the thistles and the sweat of the brow. And just at that precise moment, when I was thinking about the curse of sin, out slithered from the bush right in front of me a snake. Scared the living daylights out of me. Timing is everything, and here comes this great sermon illustration. But we need to be aware of Satan and his designs, his tactics, his MO. How does he defeat us? He deceives. John 8, verse 44, Jesus says, you are of your father, the devil, and your will is to do your father's desires. He was a murderer from the beginning, and he does not stand in the truth because there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks out of his own character, for he is a liar and the father of lies. Fundamentally, at the root, the devil is a deceiver and a liar. He wants to control the flow of information. Knowledge is power, and if he could shape what we believe and what we think we know, then he can control us. And so he lies, he manipulates, he distorts. He unleashes propaganda on a wide scale. And as is so often the case, as we realize even as human beings, a lie told often enough becomes believable to humans. In the garden, he changes one word of what God had pronounced to Adam. He adds the word not. You shall not surely die. And he adds, for God knows that in the day that you eat thereof, you shall become wise, become as God, knowing good and evil. The Apostle Paul says in Romans 11:22, behold then the goodness and the severity of God. Two sides to God's character, his goodness or kindness on the one hand and his severity on the other hand. And in the Garden of Eden, the devil denies both. His lie cuts to the very heart of who God is. He denies the severity of God. You shall not surely die. God will not punish you. A good and loving God won't do anything like that, will he? And he doesn't want you to reach your full potential. He knows that in the day you eat thereof, you will become like him, knowing good and evil. He doesn't want that. He denies God's goodness. He denies God's severity. He lies. And it's a whopper. And he's been lying ever since. He tempts. Read in your hearing just a moment ago, 1 Peter chapter 5, that the devil is prowling about like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. Chapter 5 of 1 Peter, verse 8. And therefore we are commanded to resist him firm in your faith, knowing that you're experiencing the same kind of suffering, or the same kind of suffering, same kinds of suffering are being experienced by your brotherhood throughout the world. When the devil tempts us, there are three major categories of temptation. 1 John 2:15-17, do not love the world or the things that are in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the desires of the flesh, the desires of the eyes, the pride of life, is not from the Father, but is from the world. And the world is passing away along with its desires, but whoever does the will of God abides forever. So you have the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life. And even in the garden, when in the form of a snake, he tempts the woman, she sees that the fruit of the forbidden tree is good for food, lust of the flesh. That it's a delight to the eyes, lust of the eyes. That it's desirable to make one wise, pride of life. You have those three temptations right there in the beginning, the very first temptation, the sin. And he's been doing the same thing ever since. He suppresses. Second Corinthians chapter 4 and verse 4, in their case, the God of this world has blinded the minds of the unbelievers to keep them from seeing the light of the gospel of the glory of God, or glory of Christ, who is the image of God. Luke 8, verse 12, the parable of the sower, the ones along the pathway are those who have heard. Then the devil comes and takes away the word from their hearts so that they may not believe and be saved. How does the devil do that? He minimizes, if not outright suppresses, the truth. He not only lies, but to try to control perceptions and people's understanding of what is right and wrong, what is true and false. He has to censor truth. Censorship of truth is nothing new. I don't like it when human beings censor truth. I prefer to live in a country where you have some crazy ideas expressed once in a while, but at least you have an open declaration of and a free exchange of ideas. Frederick Douglass once said, "Liberty is meaningless where the right to utter one's thoughts and opinions has ceased to exist. That of all rights is the dread of tyrants. It is the right which they first of all strike down. They know its power. Thrones, dominions, principalities, and powers founded in injustice and wrong are sure to tremble if men are allowed to reason of righteousness, temperance, and of a judgment to come in their presence. Slavery cannot tolerate free speech." In order for lies to prosper, free speech has to be shut down. And in this broken world where we have trouble sometimes differentiating truth from error, it becomes very important to be able to share ideas, even ones that are sometimes faulty, in order to be able to arrive at truth versus error. But it's nothing new. The suppression of free speech and the suppression of truth started with the devil. In Romans chapter 1 and verse 18, we read, "For the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in their unrighteousness." So human beings suppress truth because they love unrighteousness. But that all got started with the devil. Why suppression? Joseph Goebbels, minister of propaganda for the Nazis, said, "If you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will come to believe it. The lie can be maintained only for such time as the state can shield the people from the political, economic, and or military consequences of the lie. It thus becomes vitally important for the state to use all its powers to repress dissent, for the truth is the mortal enemy of the lie, and thus by extension the truth is the greatest enemy of the state." But before evil people like Goebbels came up with that idea, Satan was already trafficking in it a long, long time ago. He torments. He wreaks havoc in our lives. He not only tempts us and brings us down through the curse of sin, but there's this torment that comes with the realization of the damage that sin has done in our lives. Hebrews 2:14 and 15. "Since therefore the children share in flesh and blood, he himself likewise partook of the same things, that through death he might destroy the one who has the power of death, that is the devil, and deliver all those who through fear of death were subject to lifelong slavery." Because of the curse of sin, we say with Paul, "Wretched man that I am, who will deliver me from the body of this death?" Thanks be to God through Jesus Christ is the next thing that Paul alludes to. Jesus Christ undoes the damage that Satan has caused. but he certainly torments us on so many levels. He persecutes. I'm teaching a class on persecution of Christians for young preachers, preparing Christians for what may come in future times and what in many respects is already here. Persecution comes in many shapes and sizes. It's multidimensional. Not all persecutions are of the same stripe. Jesus says in Matthew 5:11, they revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Luke 12:11, they bring you before synagogues and rulers and authorities. Luke 21:12, delivering you up to the synagogues and prisons. You will be brought before kings and governors for my name's sake. We read a little bit about that this morning in Acts chapter 4, where Peter and John are brought before the Sanhedrin council. By what authority have you done this? As if they had committed some crime. Doing a good deed to a cripple. Luke 21:16, you will be delivered up even by parents and brothers and relatives and friends. And some of you they will even put to death. We have enjoyed relative freedom in this country, but it's not so for all Christians of all places. There are many in this world who live in totalitarian regimes and other countries that are not welcoming of the faith. And I've thought long and hard about why that is the case. And even Acts 4 that we were looking at this morning gives a good model. You have the powers that be wanted to control the narrative in society. And the truth of the matter is Christianity teaches a competing system that is not of this world. The value system that it teaches is not of this world. It promotes an independent search for truth. Church gatherings of faithful Christians are not state controlled. And so in many countries where persecution is at its hottest point, church assemblies are viewed with suspicion. And lies cannot compete with truth on an even playing field, and therefore they must be suppressed, and therefore Christianity must be suppressed. Again, we live in a free country, but I do believe our freedoms are in jeopardy. And the erosion of those freedoms is escalating in recent times. The collateral damage is already beginning, and I see that already beginning to impact Christians. I hope that something stems the tide and that our freedoms are preserved. But even if that should not be the case, persecution is not the worst thing that can happen to us. In fact, it brings many blessings. I don't believe that in the near term, at least I hope not, Christians in Western societies and in this culture in particular, I don't believe that we will be imprisoned, although that is possible. I don't believe we will be put to death, although that's possible and at some point in the future. But I do believe it's possible that careers will be sabotaged and derailed, that there will be litmus tests for good standing in society, and Christians will be called upon to agree to an agenda that faithful Christians, to which faithful Christians cannot pledge their loyalty. In Romans chapter 1 and verse 32, Romans 1 and verse 32, Paul says, for even though they know God's decree that those who practice such things deserve to die, they not only do them, but give approval to those who practice them. The one thing that we must not ever do as Christians is give approval to sin. That doesn't mean that we ever treat people in a way that does not show love, dignity, and respect. to a sordid sinner, we can show love, dignity, and respect to the person without condoning their sin. But that tolerance of another human being and love shown to another human being does not mean approval of the sin. But that's the very thing that the forces of evil want us to do, is not only to tolerate, but to approve. And so I believe that there may come a time sooner rather than later where Christians face very tough decisions, even in this society. The devil applies pressure. In our recent class on the book of Revelation, we read about the oppression of government forces against Christians, and a beast performing great signs, even making fire come down from heaven to earth in front of people. And by the signs that it is allowed to work in the presence of the beast, it deceives those who dwell on earth, telling them to make an image for the beast that was wounded by the sword and yet lived. And it was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast might even speak and might cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be slain. Also, it causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead, so that no one could buy or sell unless he has the mark, that is, the name of the beast or the number of its name. 666 comes up in the following verse. So the devil applies pressure. It may be peer pressure, social pressure, governmental pressure, pressure to go along, to get along, pressure to privatize your faith. The worship of Caesar and the Roman goddess would have been a very simple thing for New Testament Christians, but that was the very thing they could not do. They could not go along to get along. There are times when one's public life is affected. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in Daniel 3 were pressurized in a very public way to bow down to Nebuchadnezzar's golden image, and that's the one thing they were unwilling to do. They were deemed stubborn. They were thrown into a fiery furnace where God rescues them. But the devil usually doesn't stop with public life. And in Daniel chapter 6, it's Daniel's private life that is at issue. That anyone for this period of time who prays to anyone other than Darius, the king of the Medes, to any man or God, will be cast into a den of lions. And even without cell phones, tracking systems, or social credit scores, through very old-fashioned spies, Daniel was caught and thrown into a den of lions for praying privately. But that's what the devil does. He applies pressure. And you have to ultimately decide whom you will serve. How can we resist the devil? Bottom line is not without the strength of the Lord. Using the foil of demonology and demon possession in Luke chapter 11, Jesus teaches in verses 20 through 23, "But if it is by the finger of God that I cast out demons, then the kingdom of God has come upon you." Here to some Jewish leaders who were attributing the work of Jesus in casting out demons to Beelzebul. He said, when a strong man is armed, fully armed, guards his own palace, his goods are safe. But when one stronger than he attacks him and overcomes him, he takes away his armor in which he trusted and divides the spoil. Whoever is not with me is against me, and whoever does not gather with me scatters. So you can secure your personal property. We have all kinds of security in this society: home security, internet security, cell phone security. We want to secure our personal property, but if one stronger than the security intrudes, then you lose what is yours on one level or another. And the point Jesus is making is you can rely on your own strength and secure your heart. But if one stronger than your security and your defense mechanisms comes in and invades, you're going to be despoiled. Whoever is not with me is against me, and whoever does not gather with me scatters. You need me as your security, because the evil that is lurking is more powerful than you. And with that in mind, he gives a demon illustration to illustrate the broader principle of how Satan can invade. He goes on to say in verses 24 through 26, when the unclean spirit has gone out of a person, it passes through waterless places seeking rest. And finding none, it says, I will return to my house from which I came. And when it comes, it finds the house swept and put in order. Then it goes and brings 7 other spirits, more evil than itself, and they enter in and dwell there. And the last state of that person is worse than the first. Swept and in order. So you can try to secure your heart, and you can touch it up with cosmetic touch-ups. But if the devil comes and you're not filling that void with Jesus, truth abhors a vacuum. You've heard that expression. If you're not filling your life with Jesus, then all the cosmetic touch-ups in the world and all the security measures in the world are not going to prevent Satan from engaging in a frontal assault and invading and despoiling and wreaking havoc in your life. The only way you can properly defend against him, again, going back to verse 23, whoever is not with me is against me. Whoever does not gather with me scatters. You not only have to get rid of the evil, you have to fill your life with Jesus. How do you do that in a practical way? You have to love the truth. If the devil is a liar and the father of all liars, you have to love the truth at all costs. 2 Thessalonians 2, 9 through 12 says, the coming of the lawless one is by the activity of Satan, with all power and false signs and wonders, and with all wicked deception for those who are perishing, because they refuse to love the truth and so be saved. Therefore, God sends them a strong delusion so that they may believe what is false, in order that all may be condemned who did not believe the truth but had pleasure in unrighteousness. Your attitude must be truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, truth at all costs, truth, no matter what. Unchanging truth in a changing world. Isn't that our theme for this year? Not only must you love the truth, you have to stand for the truth. Ephesians 6, 10 through 13. Finally, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. Therefore, take up the whole armor of God, that you may be able to withstand in the evil day, and having done all, to stand. Not only must we love the truth, we must stand for the truth and not stand for anything less. We must be willing to pay the price. Put our own necks out on the line. Read it in your hearing just a moment ago by Brother Solomon was this idea of the devil being the old serpent, Satan, who is wreaking havoc with the saints of God on the earth because he's been cast down from heaven and now the earth is his theater of operations. And he wants to do the most damage in the time that he has, knowing that he has but a short time. But the way that we overcome him is by loving the truth, standing for the truth, and being willing to put our own lives on the line. This is costly. Revelation 12 and verse 11, they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of their testimony, for they love not their lives even to the death. If your attitude is, I love the truth, I'm going to stand for the truth, then you have to be willing to pay the price for that stand. This is not a matter in which you privatize your belief system. You have to be willing to go public with this. And you have to be willing to say, whatever the cost, I will stand with Jesus, whatever the price. You have to be willing to say with Peter, Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life, and we have believed and come to know that you are the Holy One of God. I cite this verse so many times in my public preaching here, and this is the reason. Because when your faith is on the line, you have to be willing to cast your lot with Jesus. This is a wicked world. But Jesus still challenges us. Whoever is ashamed of me and of my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of him will the Son of Man be ashamed also when he comes in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. When we come to that fork in the road of life, and the easy road stands before us or the narrow road stands before us, we must choose the road that Jesus would have us go on. Enter by the narrow gate. For the gate is wide and the way is easy that leads to destruction, and those who enter by it are many. For the gate is narrow and the way is hard that leads to life, and those who find it are few. Matthew 7, 13 and 14. Yes, life is messy. Our lives can very easily become a grand mess. But the one thing or the one person that I know is real in the midst of all the mess, it's Jesus. And only he can fix what ails us. Jack alluded in Acts 4 about this whole idea of this lame man being made well or being saved because of the connection between physical ailment and spiritual ailment and us needing to become well spiritually. You have this leper that comes to Jesus in Luke 5, 12 and 13. He says, Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean. And Luke says, Dr. Luke says that this man was full of leprosy. And Jesus approached this man as he bows down before him. And he touches him. And he says, I am willing. Be cleaned. And that man instantaneously was made well. Jesus could do that for him, and he can do it for you spiritually. He can make you well. He can make you clean. But only Jesus can do that in this world that is so messed up. Only Jesus can fix this world, and only he can fix you. With that thought in mind, let's sing a song of invitation.